Welcome back to another episode of Take It and Run with Jencks and Kelcie Dowd. We're really excited about this episode because it just keeps coming up and coming up in our lives and in the people around us. And honestly, if you're someone with a brain, you might struggle with this. And it's limiting beliefs. So I'm just going to read off like what a limiting belief is because when I looked up the definition, it included a lot more stuff that I liked. A limiting belief is a thought that you accept as true, which holds you back in some way. It's an internal story that says something like, I'm not good with money, I'm terrible at public speaking, I'll never be able to start my own business, I'm too old to change careers. These beliefs feel like facts, but they're actually based on past experiences, fears, or assumptions, not in reality. They shrink what you believe is possible and influence your decisions without you realizing it. That's spooky. The tricky part is you'll often find evidence to support a limiting belief because you're unconsciously acting in ways that confirm it. But the good news is they don't have to control you. And that's kind of what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah. So I've been inspired for a really long time by a gentleman named Roger Bannister. And I also forgot up until recently that Kelcie has a history with track and field and as a runner and an athlete, but also as a coach. So she's going to bring in some really interesting insight. So Roger Bannister was the first person to break the 4-minute mile. And that's super impressive. But I want to back up and tell you a little bit more about him because as you start to understand all of the circumstances of getting to that point, you're just going to be blown away. So, in the early 1950s, it was universally believed that it was impossible to run a mile in 4 minutes or less. But it also wasn't just in the early 1950s. Like, we're talking decade belief that you just couldn't do it. It couldn't be done. In fact, many of the doctors said that the heart and the lungs would explode if you tried. Many coaches were saying things like, it's suicide to try. And Roger was an athlete for much of his life. In his teens is when he actually took up running. He went to the 1952 Olympics for Great Britain and didn't perform super great. And he faced a ton of ridicule, and he almost gave up running. He took about a 2-month hiatus to really kind of decide if he even wanted to go after and pursue this goal. And what you also need to know about Roger is he wasn't a full-time athlete. He was actually a full-time medical student. And so he trained all on his own. He had no coach. He had no sponsors. He was just basically training before school and on his lunch breaks and when he could fit it in, which also changed some of how he was training. And Kelcie's going to give us some insights to that. But it was actually in May 1954 that, and by the way, the day of his attempt to break the 4-minute mile, it was terrible conditions. All of his friends were saying, you really shouldn't try it today. You shouldn't do it. But the sky cleared and he decided to go for it. And he crossed the finish line at 3 minutes, 59.4 seconds.
Wow.
And that absolutely shattered this long held belief that it was physically impossible to do this. Now, here's the crazy part. Up until May 1954, no one could do it. It was believed that it wasn't possible. Kelcie knows the answer, but I'm going to ask the audience, how long do you think it took for someone to break Roger's record?
After decades of
Decades.
believing
Like,
it couldn't be done.
how long would it take? This part's going to blow your mind. Within 46 days, Roger's 4-minute mile was broken. And then within a year, 24 additional people broke that record. That's how crazy it is. So what changed? What changed from the time that Roger did it to the time that, 24 other people did it? Only one thing changed, because the technology didn't get better, the shoes didn't get better, the athletes didn't all of a sudden, have some performance enhancing opportunity. There's only one thing that changed. And Kelcie kind of alluded to it. It was the belief. Once people saw that it could be done because he had done it, game on.
Mm-hmm.
And belief is contagious.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. And Roger, he didn't just break the 4 minute mile, he broke that mental barrier around what was possible. And let's think about this not just in track and field anymore, but in our realm as real estate agents, we have our own version of that barrier. And so in today's episode, we're just going to help you name it, reframe it, and take that bold action that it takes to get us out of that limiting belief. Because when you do the impossible, others will follow. So we're going to get into that.
Yeah. So what's interesting about Roger is he actually has been quoted saying a couple different things when it comes. For one, he said, I believed that it could happen. He said, I know no one had done it, but I just knew in my bones, right? I knew in my bones that it could be done. So he had this incredible belief that it was possible. And again, for some context, he was a medical student studying neurology. So I like to think that, yeah, he probably had some insight that maybe some other people didn't. But again, his peers criticized him for this goal and for even attempting to do it. But this quote I really, really love from him when he talks about, was it physically possible or not physically possible? Here's what Roger said. He said, it is the brain, not the heart or lungs, that is the critical organ. So he knew, again, he had this belief, even though no one had ever done it, he had this belief. And on top of having this belief, he knew that it wasn't his lungs or his heart or something that was going to get him over the finish line. It all started inside of his head. And I'd love for some of your perspective on this, having you being a coach of athletes in track and field, like what, how much of that belief of them being able to do it, or how much of mindset is involved when it comes to running races and winning and getting PRs?
So you and I don't do math in public, and I know that this won't add up, but I say it is 100% involved as much as your body is. Like I can't imagine, unless you're some robot machine that gets off on pain. I can't imagine being able to, especially, okay, so I was a sprinter, but as a coach, I knew that the mile in the track and field world is kind of considered a sprint nowadays. It's not.
Oh, wow.
It's just a long sprint, because what these people are doing is they are when you think about a track, they're running that whole thing in order to get under 4 minutes, which is kind of, I don't want to say standard nowadays, but it's like, it's very common now. But you're running a lap in less than a minute. And if you've never run one of those laps, if you've never walked one of those laps, it might seem smaller than it actually is. And the mental toughness and training that it takes to not only start it, but to maintain that, because you're halfway through and you realize I have 2 more to go. The worst lap, in my opinion, is the third,
How come?
because you've gone all that way and you still have another one to do.
Okay, I'm making a parallel here. It's, at the time of this recording, we're getting ready to head into quarter 3 of our business, right? So quarter 1, fresh out the gate, have all these goals, all this momentum. Quarter 2, you've built on that momentum. You're kind of going through quarter 3, right? When you think it starts in July, summer distractions. Maybe you're tired because you've already been going really hard for 6 months and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm halfway there. But
Mhm.
then you also think, like you just said, quarter 3 is the hardest because you just did 2 and you know you have one more.
Mhm.
I wonder, like, when you think about your business, quarter 3, oftentimes I see people slack off.
Mhm.
I see people slow down in their business because of distractions, because of being tired, or also because maybe they're off pace,
Mhm.
right? Like maybe you're like, well, I set this goal and I'm not going to hit it. So
Mhm.
I guess I'm just going to cruise now.
Right.
Like, do you ever see athletes do that? What does that look like? That part?
Yeah, absolutely. And they they cruise. Athletes who don't have a coach on the sideline, I think, fall into cruising more than those that do. And a coach on the sideline, especially in a mile race, they're yelling out split times, which is each lap time. So
Okay.
we're timing each split time as well, because when you have a 4 minute goal, 4 minute or under goal, the only way that you're going to be able to know if you're on pace is if you capture each mile or each lap's time, right? It's like as you're tracking goals each month or week, you look at your progress. That's the same thing. And so when you don't have a coach on the sideline giving you your pace, because that's how you calculate your pace. If I ran the first lap in 58 seconds, but I ran the second lap in a minute and 4 seconds, I gotta, like I said, lap three will basically define what happens in lap four. You have to pick it up or maintain um, in order to use all that you have left in lap four. And the coach on the sidelines gives you that pace, or you have somebody out there pacing for, like, that I coach high school, so we didn't have pacers, but the professionals will have a pacer. um,
And what does a pacer do? Because I know Roger actually had a pacer for every single lap. So he had 4 pacers, one for each lap,
mhm.
obviously. But like how important is that pacer? So you said it's the third, and you're either on target or you're going to have to pick it up.
Yeah,
What will that pacer do for you?
they'll give you something to I kind of, when I think about a pacer, I think about a magnet.
Okay.
And we're each two magnets, and I'm attracted to that magnet, and two magnets are always going to want to stick together. And so when you have this shared, you know force of a time, a shared driving force, um, you're going to try to stick together. And so that's what a pacer, I would say, does for a runner. Is it gives them, one, a reality check of where they are, because you could think you're running really hard, and sugar, you're not. um, and two, it gives you a reality check, and it gives you, in some sense, and maybe this is not just necessarily for track and field, but if we're taking it outside into other fields, it gives you accountability, it gives you a partner, it gives you somebody to do it with. um, and
That's actually what I was thinking. Like when we were discussing, this topic and bringing it into the podcast, and you had mentioned the quarter mile strategy and how you train to that, and you had mentioned the coach on the side and the pacer, and I thought, those pacers they're your mastermind. They're your crew. They're the people that you hang out with, right? And so if your pacer is not running according to the plan, right, you could get off target, right? That means that you're not going to hit your PR, or you're not going to whatever goal you're going after. But I talk to my kids about this all the time. Your friends are like an elevator. They either take you up or they take you down. In this case, your pacer is going to speed you up,
mhm,
right? And
mhm,
if you don't have good pacers, if you don't have good friends, if you're not feeding your mind the right influence, reading the right books, hanging out with the right people, you could be sitting right now thinking 2025 sucks. Nobody's buying because interest rates are high. Homes aren't selling. They're sitting on the market, this, that, and the other, right? Like all of a sudden now you've bought into a belief that you can't achieve what you want to achieve in this market
Right.
because you're a pacer or the crew that you're hanging out with is feeding that. Whereas I know, because I see this as a coach, what people focus on expands. And so if you're hanging out with a crew that's like, we're just going to find the market, we're going to be market makers, we're going to find a win, then those people are having success. It doesn't mean that it's easy. It doesn't mean that they're not fighting for it.
Yeah.
It's just that they're not accepting the fact that the market may be hard.
Yeah.
Yeah, the market is hard. And I'm just going to step up and do it. I look at our own Phoenix Metro market, which is having its own challenges with inventory and different things that are going on here. And a third of all the homes are failing to sell. 33% of the homes at the time of this recording that come on the market are coming off the market unsold. And yet we're still selling as a marketplace a little over 6,000 listings every month, right? That is, 12,000 commission checks. There has to be something for somebody in there.
Yeah.
Right? Like there's going to be an opportunity. You just have to believe that it's possible, but then you also have to take action. So what have you seen? Like, I want to talk about Roger's action, of course, and maybe let's go there first. Again, Roger, he we can cut this out. Okay, lame. Okay, so you have to believe. Roger believed, but that wasn't enough. I mean, he wasn't just like going to school saying, "Yeah, I can do this," and then he didn't do anything. He took massive action and took the first step, right? So he didn't wait for the perfect conditions. Even on the day of his race, the conditions were not perfect. Because he didn't have any sponsors and he was a full-time student, he also didn't have the perfect training conditions. He didn't have as much time as everybody else that was a full-time athlete with sponsors and coaches and all of that kind of stuff. He kind of made the best that he could. In fact, it was also known that he would sometimes put like a Ziploc bag, like a plastic bag on his feet as a barrier because of the conditions that he trained in and because of how thin his shoes were. And I mean, just like some crazy things. And I know that a lot of agents are just waiting for the market to change. They're waiting for the perfect listing. They're waiting for their system to get perfectly in place. They're waiting until they've mastered all the technology and all the scripts. And really what they need to do is just get moving because winners are already moving. They're already in momentum. So how have you seen action play a role in someone that's going after a goal or going after a PR?
I think it comes back to those limiting beliefs because remember that definition I read it, they are formed not in reality, but in maybe past experiences, fear. I would say, especially in social media today, we take other people's experiences or whatever is happening to other people, and we think that that'll happen to me. Um, and action is reality. It's the complete opposite. And doing that, it's kind of like, so, we were talking about how beliefs are contagious. Beliefs are often based in our experiences. And if we are creating disciplined experiences, if we are taking action, if we are showing up for ourselves and not listening to the lies and the fears and the drama of outside, we were talking about pacers just a moment ago, and I was thinking pacers. I was going even further with it, Kristi. Pacers aren't even just the people like our friends that we hang out with that we see. It's what we absorb on social media. It's what we absorb on the news.
Yeah.
It's the lack of absorption of absorbing good things. Even if you're like, yeah, I don't listen to it, but are you filling? Are you just staying empty? Is your brain just staying empty and dealing with its own chaos in here? Those beliefs are contagious. even in here, you're passing it, you're playing hockey with yourself in here.
Mhm.
And if you don't throw something in there to interrupt it, which comes from action, it's just going to keep going and perpetuating. So those pacers, what are you filling your mind with so that you are taking action, you're being inspired to, we know that great things don't just come from inspiration, right? They don't just come from motivation, but they come from taking action. But they start there a lot, Sometimes it's just the right message at the right time. But if you're ignoring all messages, it's gonna be hard to move that needle. Um, I think that answered your original question.
So I have some reflective questions on this to kind of tie it all together and bring us to a close. Is there's probably a 4-minute mile in your business right now, right? What's the 4-minute mile that you're dealing with right now? What's the belief, what feels impossible in your business? But if it happened, everything would change. And then, what's the bold move you've been avoiding, right? What's the small task that might be a little bit scary, but it could change your pipeline? You know, again, Roger created this ripple, this belief, and it spread like a wildfire, right? And so you need to ask yourself, what's one bold action I could take this week that could truly change everything, right? You don't need more time. You don't need you don't need to wait for permission. You just need to have the belief and to take action, bold action. And then I would also add consistency into that, right? You can't just take action once. I hear that all the time. Oh, I did an open house and it didn't work. I made calls and it didn't work. And that's not everything that,
Yeah.
that plays into it. And then I would also remind you, so on the Monday huddle that I do for my clients, we had a guest come on. His name was Ricky, and he shared this idea of having a folder in your phone that says, I am great. And you take screenshots and messages, text messages, different things, and you put them all in a folder so that if you're feeling down or if you are, if you have a limiting belief or you're feeling down or you're comparing yourself to someone else, you open that up. And I actually created an I am great folder on my phone. And what I found in my I am great folder is that if I have a limiting belief, I like to go in here. Or if I'm having imposter syndrome, if I'm struggling, I'm going to look to my evidence that I've done hard things before and I can continue to do hard things. So like this is this is a text message that I took a screenshot of, and it just said, I sent the equity email, and in 2 hours, I had a 31% open rate with 39 clicks and 7 direct email reply requests for reports. This one works. Thank you, Kristi.
Nice.
So when my clients send me things like this, or when I hit a PR at the gym, sometimes I'll take a screenshot of that and I'll put it in my I am great folder. I want you guys to remember that you could have a breakthrough today. You've already done hard things. You just need to remember that you've done hard things and you can continue to do hard things and you need to get into action.
Yep. Evidence. Yeah. So the key takeaways from this episode, because we all have limiting beliefs and they're not going to stop. Like
Wouldn't that be nice?
wouldn't it would be, but like that's what resilience comes from, and and it could be easier to identify them. I'd say that the more that you practice these things, the easier they are to identify, the easier they are to discredit. So having that evidence, one, that you are capable, that you aren't like a lump that doesn't do anything. I'm thinking about my own limiting beliefs. Um, Having that at the ready is important. If you're spiritual, if you're religious, having some kind words, some loving statements, some core truths that you believe that can give you faith through difficult times. Um, because limiting beliefs don't just come when things are great on the outside, excuse me, and your brain's trying to trick you. Limiting beliefs can come when you've been given a diagnosis. And
Yeah.
and they're really, 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 really hard limiting beliefs to overcome. But they can come in terrible conditions. But so evidence, a pacer. So by that, Kristi mentioned it, a mastermind, a core group of people that share your uh, share your field. I would say, I think you can find some great pacers, not in real estate, but it'll help if they know the same struggle that you're up against. And don't think it's necessary all the time, especially if you have a great pacer, but a coach on the sidelines, um, to not yell at you, but sometimes we had to yell in order for them to hear us over everything that's going around in them.
Ooh, that's so good.
They're breathing hard, other coaches are yelling at them, the crowd is screaming, sometimes it's super windy, so like there's so much noise. And a coach that you're tuned to know their voice because you've gone through training and training and training and training as they're yelling out splits at you, you can hear it and you can adjust. Those three things are needed, I would say. I mean, coach, maybe I'm biased to having a coach, but those three things are killer against
Okay.
those limiting beliefs.
So, if this was your breakout quarter, what would you do differently, right? What is your Roger Bannister moment going to be?
Especially if you knew you couldn't fail.
Yeah. If you knew you couldn't fail. And just remember, let's go out and break some 4-minute miles. And when you do, others will follow. Thanks for tuning in.
Thanks, guys.